Hello, everybody. Today I have Chuck Uebele, photographer and Photoshop artist. Hello, Chuck.
Hey, Andrew. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Good seeing you.
Thanks.
So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a technical and scientific photographer. I generally classify myself as an industrial photographer. Been doing this for over 30 years. Been into photography all my life, as long as I can remember. I mean, I love looking through viewfinders when I was a kid and just got hooked on it and have all my life.
Excellent. And
I'm also, I do a lot of Photoshop scripting. And so I'm trying to incorporate that into my artwork also. So that's a big part of my photography.
And how did you get into like your Photoshop compositing? When did that happen?
I started that in high school. I mean,
Nice.
I got hooked early on. I loved the work of Jerry Olsman, and I was trying, read things in popular photography about doing like out of the box pictures. I'd go to the nurse's office when I'd have a doctor's appointment. They'd be giving me a shot, and I'd be taking pictures of them with the syringe out, pointing at me and stuff. So I've always been interested in compositing, just from very early.
Nice, nice. Okay, so what creative projects are you currently working on? You want to show us some?
Yeah, let me see if I can get this to work.
Yeah, it's fine. It's just the share screen button or screen share button at the top left. Let's see me.
Okay.
Go to a tab.
Let's see. Do you see a picture?
Yes.
Okay.
So you're already in the slideshow. Great.
Yep. Great. Okay. This was like I said, I mentioned I was interested in compositing very early on, and this is one I started in high school. Actually, I took a picture of myself holding the frame, and then a picture of the background of just the tuba, and I didn't really do anything with it. And then I came across the photo years later and decided to put myself into it. So I shot a current picture of myself and positioned myself as if I were actually in the tuba playing it, and kind of laughing at myself, my younger self, I should say. So that was kind of fun to do. I like doing fun, kind of humor in my images.
Cool.
This image was also done in high school. This was, before Photoshop. This was all done with lithofilm. My sophomore year high school book, I saw a high contrast image published in it, and I just got hooked on this stuff, and I started playing around with it all the time. And so I did this line drawing that ended up in our yearbook at my junior year. This is some of my early compositing work. With the lithofilm, I would take pictures, and like this is my roommate. I put a profile and front view of him and composited in, and then use it, made the posterization, and then I applied it to a material called color key that was used for proofing to make these posterizations. Now, of course, in Photoshop, you can do a posterization in a few seconds. This would take several hours. This was another one using lithofilm and color key.
I like the surreal, like switch of the eyes and the mouth too.
Yeah, what's interesting is years later, just a few years ago, I saw somebody who did a photograph, and it was exactly like this. I mean, down to the T. The mouth open on the same one side of the eye in the mouth, the other eye closed, and it was this is too weird of a picture to have something like that duplicated. I think it was kind of odd.
Yeah, fun.
And other things I like to experiment with. This was a X-ray of our horse's hoof, and I took the DICOM file and applied it to a depth map and made it a 3D plane out of it. Applied a gradient to it. Just kind of experiment around and see what happens, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, nice abstract.
This was another shot I did in high school. I was interested in the slow shutter speed, where they have the heavy neutral density. Back then, I didn't have the neutral density, so I just piled on all the filters I could, and I shot a series of blurred waves. And years later, I took those images and combined them in Photoshop, assigning a negative to each RGB color channel, and came up with this.
Nice.
I'm also, there's another little experiment I did. I used to do a lot of view camera work. So I attached this, my digital camera to my view camera so I could use the swings and tilts and all the good stuff with the view camera. And this is what I kind of came up with. This is I wanted to get just the front of the camera in focus and everything else blurred. So I swung the lens and achieved this effect. This is actually a very large pano because I had to shift the back of the camera to get everything in. Another experiment that I did, I took a GoPro and attached a rope to it and a weight and dropped it off a pier and then turned the rope around while the camera was taking a series of pictures. And then I stitched them all together in this 360 pano of the ocean bottom.
Nice.
Also was very into genealogy. This was a old tintype of my third great grandmother, Sarah Lee. It was poorly exposed, very bad condition. So I tried to experiment by seeing how much I can improve it. The image on the left is a straight shot with my camera and then I reshot it using cross-polarizing filters to reduce the glare and the imperfections. And then after heavily retouching it, I also applied frequency separations, kind of like more of a band pass where you could create a series of layers that accentuate various sizes of the image. That way I could bring out the modeling in the face, the detail in the collar, detail in her hair and dress and such like that. This image won a Guru Award at Photoshop World for photo restoration.
Excellent.
I took a class with Burt Monroy years ago, and he really changed the way I looked at my photography. I suddenly realized I could start adding effects and drawings to my images. And this was an example of one of his tutorials from that seminar, this underwater scene. So I got some old shots I took at Marineland of sharks and turtles and an old picture of my parents' 58 Chevy and combined them all in this image called Flood of 58.
Nice. Fun.
That's another fun image I did. I took a class in college on Jung, and we were talking about archetypes. So I wanted to do an image based on archetypes back then, but I never got around to it. So about 20 years later, I finally came up with this image of kind of what face are you wearing. And a friend convinced me to do another image with Jung as a basis on his version of the anima. So I came up with this with my daughter and myself. Another kind of fun image was one that was inspired by Twilight Zone episode where a scientist developed a machine that hears plants talk. I also heard a TV show many years ago where they attached a polygraph to a philodendron and dumped brine shrimp into a vat of acid in the next room. And the philodendron reacted to the shrimp being dumped into the acid. So it kind of makes you wonder how aware plants are.
Yeah.
Another fun image I took back in college, I had to do an ad, and I did one with Lowry's seasoning salt and a forest of vegetables. So years later, I redid it again and used my daughter and put her in this forest of vegetables again, but more like a child's nightmare than a forest of flavor. This is an experiment I was doing with 2 cameras. I set up 2 cameras, one above the other, to get this mirror effect. It's actually not a mirror, it's actually 2 separate images. And then I combine them in Photoshop to give the impression that being pressed down upon. It was a study in depression.
Yeah, it's excellent.
Again, I'm getting inspired all sorts of weird places. I was at Home Depot and I was standing in line. I looked up at the ceiling and saw all the camera balls for surveillance and got the feeling of Big Brother. So I did this image. I was renovating an apartment and it was empty. So I shot the base image in this and then drew in the camera balls and went outside, took a separate image of myself looking through the blinds just to give the feeling that you're being watched.
A nice mood to it.
Yeah, all the very monotone colors and kind of cold look. Mm-hmm. This was an image kind of based on flower power, the old 60s thing. I took a lily, and this is several exposures again, a base image with the lighting of the lily, and then I shot an image with just highlighting the base of the lily, so it makes it look like it glowed. And then the rest was composited. The extension cord was actually orange. It's the only one I had at the time, so I had to change the color of that. Love Escher's work. This was a direct takeoff on one of his famous images. And I also always wanted a Cintiq but could never afford one, so I did this image. You can kind of tell that the styluses are old Intuos 2 styluses.
Yeah, but, Wacom should use that for the...
Well, actually, they saw this and they liked it, and they gave me a free Intuos 3 for it. Not quite a Cintiq, but they were very generous. They're a great company. I was very impressed.
Nice.
Another fun image. This is combining illustration and photography again, kind of real hands-on digital imaging, where you kind of actually reach in and modify your picture. This is another Escher-inspired image. Kind of called The Cameraman. I used a lot of smart objects to make this. Made it a lot easier to create individual picture frame or film frames. This was a study I did when Puppet Warp came out in CS6. I took again the Wacom stylus and shot a series of exposures with the light rotating around the stylus. I then combined all the exposures, Puppet warped the stylus, and then masked out the different exposures to make it look like the light was coming from below, the blue lettering, and from above. Again, this is a combination of photo and illustration. I created all these hexagons in the background to represent hex code, and basically it's called letting go of the old analog film and falling into digital. So I created the CMOS chip frame that I'm falling through, clutching onto an old film strip of Panatomic X.
Right.
I also was starting to try to make a statement about the use of the grunge in pictures. I feel like a lot of pictures apply a grunge effect to them without really much thought. And so in this image, I have it applied a grunge effect to where the electricity is striking the hands and the face, and then it's clear where it isn't. This is a little bit more of a takeoff on the grunge effect. In fact, this was based entirely on the overuse of the grunge. I wanted a picture where half of the picture had the grunge effect applied and the other half didn't. So I shot a picture of myself. I needed a haircut really bad one day, so I messed up my hair, set up a little studio in my bathroom doorway, actually, so I can use it to flag the lights to create the rim lighting, which is also very popular these days. And then I went and got a haircut and shaved and shot the other picture. It was a little challenging trying to line myself up after that amount of time. And then I'm very into making sure lighting looks pretty much realistic. So to make the lighting look like the background matches the subject, I added the block glass window to this image. This alley did not have that in there, and it didn't have the floodlight up in the upper left.
Very creative. Yeah. Didn't this win an award?
Yeah, this won Best in Show at Photoshop World. Got a Guru Award for it. It was also on the cover of Photoshop User magazine. Had a good title below it. It said non-destructive editing. I thought that was kind of funny with the chainsaw. It kind of fit really well.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Anyway, this is a close-up of that image, and I wanted safety goggles, but I didn't want to use modern ones, and I didn't have steampunk ones, so I actually drew in these goggles to create them. Same as the glass that kind of separates the grunge side and the non-grunge side. I also like to play around with 3D. This was an experiment I did. I brought a face that I created in Poser into Photoshop and created a depth map of it, and then blended that into a plane, 3D plane to create this image.
Right.
It's a little slow. Sometimes I just try and do a completely image that's all illustration. And this is one that I did that was inspired on my failed attempt at using contact lenses. I've got a particular eye problem that can only be corrected with hard contacts, and they didn't work very well.
Yeah, I had to switch to glasses because I felt like my eyes weren't breathing with contacts. You know.
Yeah, it was just so I could only wear it for about 2 hours, and then I had to remove them. I felt like tearing my eyes out. But this is a close-up showing the kind of like you're in an office for an optometrist where they do implants. So that's where the kind of iris.
Now this surely looks like you were influenced by Burt Monroy with the.
Oh, definitely here. I definitely thought of him and his neon lights because he always loves to do those. So I kind of did that too.
And all the detail. And...
Yeah. This is another illustration, strictly illustration that I did. The only thing that I use, I got my daughter to pose in that position just as a basic reference, but everything else is illustrated. In fact, the hairs with my first attempt at illustration, the clouds are all illustration. I just love to put detail on the thing, and I got a couple of close-up views. Like here, Theresa Jackson won a Guru Award for creating Paisley's shirt, and so I talked to her about that a little bit and came up with the idea to make a pattern for this dress, and I used the ball and chain because it's basically, this image is called The Juggler. It's basically trying to how people juggle things in their lives and things that weigh them down like the ball and chain. So you can see the detail of the seams and the hair and all in this.
A lot of work.
Yeah. And I spent a lot of time, a little too much time on the detail, like the grasses and weeds and stuff. My wife gave me a hard time about that. Yeah. Like the dead grass in this image was done with the Deco script image, where I created a series of dead grass patterns and just filled it with that. It's a great, Deco scripts are great stuff.
Correct.
In fact, I got very involved in it. And when it was coming out, I thought of all sorts of possibilities. And one of them is that using it with an ability to sample a reference image. I talked to the engineer. I've worked with the engineer quite a bit on these scripts and kept mentioning to get the ability to sample images. And he says it's not really possible right now. So I've come up with a workaround. I've got a script that it's actually available to the public on my website, ueblephoto.com, that you can do this type of stuff. But it will create a sample XML file, and then you can use that to change the patterns of the for the fill. In this one, I used ones and zeros, and you can see a little bit closer here the ones and zeros that were used. The density of the image dictated which was used, either the ones or zero, based on whether it was light or dark. This is another image using the Deco scripts where I created an index color of the horse and then created 6 different cross-stitch patterns and a series of different highlight patterns, and used my script to assign a color value to those different patterns, and it came up with this. So this is something that you can really do with the Deco scripts that most people don't know. It's a very powerful tool. You might have to sell this to Adobe or On1 or Nick or somebody. Well, actually, I created a preference part of this script where you can save different preferences because it's a little complicated script, and Adobe actually used that my script for that, and they gave me a little byline in one of the Deco script photo files. If you look under in there, you'll see my name. So I got my name in Photoshop. It's kind of cool. I got interested with the Deco script. I was kind of doing something like that before they came out, but this is what I'm kind of doing lately. I'm taking a reference image, making shape layers, and then applying a gradient to those shape layers based on the image values. And this is one where I just took rectangles and applied the gradient. Then I went and started using ovals. This was a sea turtle I shot in Florida. And this is another one of the ovals, picture of my old beagle. And I started using different shapes. And this is a peacock feather. And so I applied the gradient to each of the shapes, but the type of the shape is based on the density of the image. So it would apply a different shape based on that. That got a little complicated with some images, so I kind of went to a very simple script where I just created a series of random width lines and applied a gradient to them. I kind of like the very simple feel to that.
Yeah.
And I kind of changed that around, and I put the lines at angles, and I used different width lines to make several passes, applied drop shadow to give a little bit of depth. So it's more fun. I've been playing around with that.
Nice. And
then I started taking the lines, the graded lines, and I applied it to ovals. I would draw one or two ovals and have my script connect those ovals with the lines. And this was an image I came up of a turtle sunning itself on a log.
That's great abstract.
Yeah, this is the same type of script with the ovals, applying the script to different areas of the picture.
Yeah, this is fantastic. I remember seeing this one before. So
the ovals were a little hard because trying to make an oval fit the image was very challenging, and so I came up with a way to, let's see if it will come up. Here we go. This one actually takes any shape layer I come up with, will apply a gradient to it based on a reference image, but it will put the endpoints between two paths. So that way it gives me a little more flexibility to do odd-shaped images where the ovals were very limiting. And that's about it for my thing. I know you're going to ask me about my favorite project, so I got a few slides of
yeah, that's the next question. So yeah, you could just kind of
go right into that.
Yep. Can you recall your favorite creative project ever?
Yeah.
Question.
Like I said, I used to be very interested in genealogy, and this is a picture of my great-grandmother, the little girl there that says me. She drew all over all her pictures, and one of her in-laws family group shots she put on the top. McCain's all dead now.
Crazy.
She lived to be about 94, 96 and attended my wedding. She was a very funny lady, and I remember her coming up and telling me only the good die young, so don't be too good. Anyway, her dad built, the guy, one of the guys labeled Dad, William Beard, built an opera house in North Woodstock, New Hampshire. And this was around the turn, 1897 it was built. And she told me about it, and I went up there when quite a few years ago, probably 10, 15 years ago, on my company sent me there for an assignment. And so I went looking around for the opera house. I took this picture with me, and they referred me to the town historian, and the historian said that, oh, the opera house burned down years ago. So I was a bit bummed about that. But then he said, oh, but I have the original blueprints. And so I got a copy of the blueprints. And well, this is another shot of postcard I found. But the Hotel Fairfield next to the opera house, which is in the background, was owned by my great-grandmother's uncle. And both of these buildings burned down in the fire. So anyway, I took the CAD, or the blueprints, and turned it into a 3D CAD drawing. And this is the frame construction of the opera house in the CAD program. I then went around and found a neat view that I liked, and I came up with this shot of the interior of the opera house.
You drew this by hand?
This was from the CAD program. It was a wireframe, and I did a hidden line rendering of it. So I brought this into Photoshop just as lines. And then I also rendered it in the CAD program showing how light would fall on all these boards. And then in Photoshop, I rendered it and came out like this.
Wow.
And this also won a Guru Award for illustration.
Yeah, well deserved.
I spent about a year doing this, and the only thing that is actually a photograph in this illustration are the blueprints on the table. Those are the actual blueprints that I received. They were actually white and black, but I changed them to the old cyanotype things because it just looked cooler and more period. But I like the detail, and the little girl in the window there was taken from that first picture I showed of my great-grandmother's family. So I kind of thought, oh, I'd put her in the window of her uncle's hotel like she's watching her dad's opera house being built.
Burt Monroy influenced once again, looks like.
You got garbled there.
Oh, I was saying Burt Monroy influence once again. It looks
oh,
like.
Yeah. Same here. Here's a close-up of the table. Table is fun. Little details like the drill holes into the table and all the numbered detailing on the carpenter square, the saw. That little button on the saw actually says Uebele photo, but it's so it's reduced so you can't see it anymore. But definitely go for the detail a lot.
Fantastic.
And this is a close-up of the lumber. Each piece of lumber was separately made. I know I could have done it a lot easier and did a blanket rendering, or brushing of brush strokes and what have you. But each board is a individual smart object that I took and I skewed it, two separate smart objects, so I could try and get the grain to wrap around it. And if you notice the knots, I'm not sure if my cursor is showing up. Is it?
It is now, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Like this knot here, how it wraps around the board, and over here, how it wraps around. I use the two smart objects and transform to skew them to make it look like that. And after doing all those boards, I was thinking, it'd be really great if Photoshop had a feature where you could transform on a datum line and do transforms not just 90 degrees or 0 degrees. So I sent in a feature request to Photoshop years ago, suggesting this, and they seemed very interested, asked me a lot of questions, and then just recently they came out with perspective warp. So I kind of like to think that I had a little hand in getting that going.
I bet you did.
Yeah, let's see. This is just a close-up of, I have the carpenters heckling the guy on stage singing. This was a reference shot of myself. I redrew myself and took off my hair and gave myself a beard. So.
Fun. Great.
Anyway, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Come back to that.
I'm good.
So yeah, there we go. Great.
Let's see if I find you again. There you are.
Yeah, fantastic. Great variety. Really, really excellent work. You can see the amount of discipline and focus that takes for that. So, yeah. So briefly, what would you say about what future projects you would like to work on or currently working on?
Still interested in doing the scripting, like I've shown here. I have a couple illustration projects I have in mind. It's just they take me so much time. I'm not a great illustrator, not like Aaron Blaze or Patrick Lamontagne, who can whip these out, in a day or two or a week.
Yeah.
But I'd like to do more of that. I've also been approached by one of the Adobe engineers to do a collaboration project, art project with them actually.
Perfect.
And I'm also starting to do a technical and scientific imaging group with George Reese, who's a forensic photographer. We're starting a group down in Southern California and trying to get compare notes and get people involved in, this type of photography. So a couple of different things I'm trying to do.
Fantastic. So yeah, truly wonderful work. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And so where can people find you?
I'm on Behance. You can just type in a search for Chuck Uebele, and there's not too many Uebele, so you'll find me there. And same with Google+. I probably have more work on Google+, so you can do a search on Chuck Uebele, and I will be there. I do have Facebook, but I usually try to limit that to more personal stuff, so there's not a lot of my work on there. And if I don't really know you, I may not accept you as a friend.
Right, sure.
Because it's nature of my work.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your creativity with all of us, and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I'll be posting these and the interview on all the different groups and social networks. So thank you so much. It was truly wonderful.
All right, thanks a lot, Andrew.